Hey, good people, welcome back to Monique's book list. So, today we're going to talk about my top five worst books that I read in 2018. That doesn't mean that they were published in 2018. Some of them were probably published before 2018. I know one is for sure published before 2018. Let me move this mic down. This looks really silly all the way up there. All right. So let's get started. I wanted to do more than just the top five, but I found myself I wanted to do worst mystery, worst thriller, but unfortunately, my top five, many of them fall within those categories too. So I'm just going to talk about my top five worst, the worst romance I read, the worst classic book I read, and then more about not necessarily the worst, but some of the most forgettable books. I can't tell you crap about these books. Also, so all right. So first, the top five, and I'm gonna go in the order of my. I'm gonna go from I didn't like to my least favorite of all. Okay. So let's get started. So at number five is Toil and Trouble, 15 Stories of Witches and Witchcraft. Now, I kind of felt bad about putting this on the list because I actually enjoy, because it's, to just give you a brief summary about the book, it is a group of short stories about witches and witchcraft, and I read it as a part of, I think it was called Spookathon. And the issue with this book is that, again, there are 15 stories, and many of them start very weird. Like, they start, kind of in the middle of a story, in my opinion. And the reason why it's on the list is because out of 15, I think I like three of the stories, short stories. There was one about a woman fell in love with, or not a woman, a witch. Well, she's a woman. A witch who fell in love with a soldier or a defecting soldier from I think around the Civil War. Was called a water or well witch. I don't even quite remember the whole story. But she fell in love with him, and he was traveling with two horrible men who they ended up with a bad ending to their story. But that was a cute story. I like the story about the young girl who fell in love with her best friend who was a girl, and how they wound up staying together even though they were kind of from two different tribes, kind of. I like that story. And then I also like the story about the sisters. I think there were three sisters who were witches, and one of them saw the future, and she was trying to understand why she was the only sister left in their city, and she was kind of trying to understand that. And I like that story. So those are the only three stories out of 15. So I felt like I had to put it on the list for that reason. Number four is Six Wakes. Six Wakes is boring. It was boring. It was boring. It was boring. It's kind of sci-fi. And to be fair, sci-fi is not my thing. So I'm not really crazy about sci-fi. I'm not going to go into too much about that. But Six Wakes is, just to give you a brief summary, because I don't even want to waste time talking about it, is about these people who are on a ship. And in this period, in this world, there's 6 copies of yourself. And when you get to the final copy of yourself, that's like your true death, if you will. And the main character wakes up on his 6th copy of himself, and he's trying to figure out who killed the other 5 copies, and his shipmate's 5 copies too. So yeah, it was boring. I was very angry. I actually stopped reading it and started listening to it. I had it on my Kindle, the Kindle app, and then I just literally was just like, I don't want to spend time reading this. So I started listening to it on 2.0 Like literally, they sounded like the chipmunks reading to me very fast, so I could just get through the book because I promised my friend I would read it, and it was awful. Number three is The Diviners. I actually DNF'd it. Just to give you a brief summary, The Diviners is actually a series. This was the first book in the series. It takes place in the 20s, and it's a group of the main characters are like kind of a motley crew of characters. The one character is a girl who, if she touches you, she can kind of see what you've done. And that kind of thing. Anyway, and then another character is this kid who from Harlem, he can heal people. And then there's this other character. And what happens is her friends, well, you pick up in the book of her leaving her hometown to go to New York City because she got into some kind of trouble, and her parents were like, this is the last thing. We're going to send you to your uncle and let you just be with your uncle because we ain't got time for you and your shenanigans. And I hated this book. Like, I think I got to like chapter 10 and I was just like, I ain't got time for this. So I DNF'd it. Yeah. So my second least favorite book is If We Were Villains. And this book has been hyped so much. And I was so excited to read it because I love mystery. I love thrillers. And this book was so pretentious. The characters were pretentious. The writing was pretentious. The way they talked in this book was pretentious. The book was pretentious. And it was way too long for what it was. Just to give you a synopsis, there's these theater students. They go to this very small school. And I think there's James, Matt. I think there's three girls. Sorry, there's Richard, James, Matt. So there's six friends. And one of the six friends winds up dead. And you're trying to figure out who actually killed them. And one of the six friends is serving time. And he's telling his story about what actually happened with that person's death and who actually killed him. And I don't think I'm giving anything away because you kind of get the sense as soon as you start reading the book that the person who went away for the murder may have not been the person who killed him. So you're trying to, like, his story is trying to tell you, like, is he really the person who killed him or was it one of the other friends? And you figure it out, but it was pretentious. And I think the thing that angered me the most is the way they talk. Like, they use Shakespeare. They talked. They used a lot of Shakespeare when they spoke, and it really bothered me. And when the friend who we did this buddy read, I did a buddy read with my friend, and she read it, and she was like, well, it was kind of, she felt it was boring, and it was kind of boring for me too. She's like, but I didn't really mind the Shakespearean, speeches and, monologues that they would do throughout the book. And she's like, that's theater students kind of. I was like, no, we know theater students. They don't behave like this. They're not just randomly like, dost thou not talk to me this way? Or, they don't do that. They don't behave that way. I thought it was, that's why I said the book was pretentious, because it was supposed to be kind of realist, but it was like in realism, or you could see this happening in real life, but then it was just like, no, I don't know any people who would just randomly start talking like that. Like, I did not like this book. And of course, my number one least or disliked book from 2018, if you haven't seen any of my videos, and this is probably going to be my most unpopular opinion, is The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. Now, before I start talking about Miss Evelyn Hugo, I'm going to talk about the other books on my list, and then I'm going to do a review of Miss Evelyn Hugo. All right, so my worst romance is any book by, or many books by Megan March. She has a total of 29 romance books, and the reason why I mention all 29 is because they're kind of connected. Like, the characters, they'll show up in another one of the romance books. They're all kind of entwined with each other. She does have 4 standalone books. They're romance / smut. I will openly admit that. The things that I did not like about her books is I read quite a few. If you look at my Goodreads, you'll see I read quite a few. at the end of me reading a few of them, or towards the end, I just kind of noticed there was a thing. There was a thing that you were gonna immediately notice in these books. The men are very alpha male, and she says that. She says that if you go to her website, she says she writes alpha male, adult contemporary or adult content books. So I can't be upset with that. I wasn't upset with that. I was upset with some of the language, like all the men claim the women a little too much. It was always she's mine, she's mine. There's a lot of that. I didn't like that. And that phrase is every book I read, it was said at least once in every book. Some of the adult relationships, you'll see a theme there where there's certain acts that she really emphasizes that she wants you to know that these characters are going to do, and it was a little too much of it was too much. So yeah, so worst classic was Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. I know it's a classic. I've challenged myself to read at least 2 to 3 classics a year to get through all the classics. I would put Frankenstein there, but I haven't finished it. So it's not there. The reason why I didn't like Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde was because the writing was team fuck too much. I'm sorry if you don't like cussing, but it was fuck too much. Read like someone was writing an essay for their college professor, and they wanted to impress their professor with a lot of flowery words and a lot of like visual, like it just was team too much. But I was glad I got through it. I'm glad to know the story of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I'm just glad I don't got to read it ever again. The book I dislike the most that I've read in the last year is hands down The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. I've tried to do this review, I'm not gonna lie, 4 times, and all 4 times I found myself getting more and more enraged when I thought about the content. So I think the reason why I'm so upset is because of how it's promoted it's promoted heavily on BookTube. It has, I'm pretty sure, a really decent rating on Goodreads. I usually don't do disclaimers because I feel like I'm an adult and I don't set out to offend anyone. And if I do offend you, I would prefer for you just to talk to me and say, hey, I thought that was offensive. And we could just talk about it. So and I said all that to say this. I am going to do a disclaimer for this video and this video only because of the fact that I hate this book. I am not trying to offend anyone. I'm on. All right, let me just get started. So the Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo is about a woman who is telling her life story to a journalist who she's chosen. And we'll just talk about the main characters. So spoiler, there's going to be spoilers throughout my review. So spoiler. If you don't want to know anything about this book and don't want to be spoiled about the Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, you may want to click off now. This book is at least a year old, so I'm already late to the game for reading it. I openly admit I know that. All right, so let's get started. All right, so again, Evelyn Hugo is this aged, lovely movie star, would be the equivalent, or if she was a real person. I think they kind of took part of her base of her story from Elizabeth Taylor. That's how I feel. I think it's because, and I believe, I'm almost positive that Elizabeth Taylor had at least 5 husbands. I think she had 5 husbands. Anyway, Evelyn had 7. And the reason why I don't like this book, or one of the overarching reasons why I don't like this book, is how it's painted to people who are going to read it. And and maybe it was just, I'm not, the way I took it from most of the reviews on BookTube and even on Goodreads is that it's a love story, and that, you know, some of the characters are not very lovable. You're gonna, you know, you may hate them or that kind of thing, but it's a really good story, and you should read it because it's really good, and it's a beautiful romance, and it reminds me so much of Elizabeth Taylor. Just like I said, that's how most of the reviews are done. Um, the only thing I believe that she has common with Elizabeth Taylor is that they've had a lot of husbands. That's the only thing that I believe that these two women, even though Evelyn is fictional, have in common. Um, so let me get into the story of Evelyn. Evelyn is an aging movie star who had 7 husbands. She decided to tell her life story to a journalist by the name of Monique Grant. Monique Grant is a little like put, you know, kind of like dumbstruck because this fantastic actress wants to tell, you know, Monique her story. And let's give you some context of who Monique is. Monique is a biracial woman whose father is black, whose mother is white. Her father has passed because he was drinking and driving and killed himself. So let's get started. So we sit down with Evelyn and she explains to Monique, like, I only want you. I don't want anyone else. We're gonna write the story, and I want you to write a book. I don't want you, because I'm sorry, that's one of the things is like Monique is only tasked to write an article for a magazine, but Evelyn says all the information I'm about to give you is not gonna be able to go into a magazine. I want you to write a book. Promise me you're gonna write a book. And she does. She says, yeah, I'll write a book. One of the things is that Evelyn is Latin. However, she whitewashes herself to appear as a white woman so that she can become a movie star. She uses every single man that she comes in contact, including all 7 of her husbands, to become famous. Now, I think the problem I have with this book, if this was a man story and he was just using women to make himself popular, and if he did the same thing that Evelyn did, would we all be praising this book as a romantic book? And she had 7 husbands, and out of the 7 husbands, the story that she's telling Monique is also about her greatest love. None of the 7 husbands was her greatest love. It was a woman by the name of Cecilia, who is a problematic character, who demanded that Evelyn declare she's a lesbian several times throughout the book, when Evelyn keeps saying, I'm not a lesbian, I'm bisexual. I can fall in love with a man and a woman, and a woman. I'm choosing, you know, I've fallen for you as a woman, and I only want to be with you. So their relationship was so problematic. It was so problematic. Like, Cecilia was a bullying Evelyn about her sexuality. And as I said, Evelyn used her body to literally throughout the entire book to advance her career, and to also hide her secret romance with Cecilia. At one point, when she's 16, she sleeps with a movie producer who is a grown man, so she can become a movie star. I think the thing for me was, I think I was okay with the chunk of, like, with all of that, until you find out the reason why she chose Monique as the person to write a story. So, as I told you at the beginning of this, is that Monique's father has passed away because he was drinking and driving, crashed into a tree and killed himself. Not fucking true. One of Evelyn's husbands, who happened to be a gay man, who Evelyn married as a beard for her, Cecilia, and for Harry and his boyfriend at the time. meets Monique's father, and Monique's father is clearly either bisexual or he's gay, or he's identifying as one of those. And Harry falls for him, and he tells Harry, like, like, I can't be with you even though I don't have the exact same feelings I have for you as I have for my wife. I am a father. I do have a child, and I do love her enough not to leave her as a single mother with my child. Harry gets so drunk and is driving them home that he runs the fucking car into the tree and kills Monique's father. Evelyn happens upon the accident. Her and the limo driver take Harry out of the front seat, put him in the limo, put Monique's father into the driver's seat, and drive away. And let both Monique, her mother, and the world believe that this black man was drinking and driving and killed himself. Now, maybe it's because of the climate that we live in, but that shit bothered the fuck out of me. Okay? I don't want to. That is problematic on so many levels, and the way she justified it, she's like, look, I don't regret what I did because I would do anything to protect my family. So she sat across from a woman whose father has been identified as a person who drinks and drives and has died, and she let his family believe this about this man, and honestly into the time that she's about to die. Not like when Monique is 16 or 17 or 18 or 19, but Monique is a grown ass woman, like already been married, about to be divorced, grown ass woman. She waits until then to tell this woman that I know who killed your father. Your father wasn't a bum ass motherfucker. It was my lousy drunk of a husband who did this, or a drunk of a friend. I think he was her friend at the time, and they weren't married anymore. Friend who killed your father. Like, that shit burns me. Like, nobody mentions that. Evelyn still got her happy ever after. She got to be with, and that's the thing. She got to be with the woman she loved, like, until that woman died. So that shit bothered me. I think the only thing that would make me very happy about this book is if there was an epilogue that was written where Monique wrote the book and included that Evelyn and this limo driver covered up her father's murder, because he was murdered. Either it was accidental or if it was on purpose, he was murdered. So that would be the only thing that makes me feel good about this. I would love to know how you feel about this book and the other four books that I say are my top 5 worst reads of 2018. Yeah.